Hello and welcome to Dish Shelved with Adam White. Today I'm going to talk about Batgirl, the Bronze Age versus the Digital Age. I'll go ahead and tell you that I'm calling this is a fairly new story of Batgirl of Burnside Omnibus. I've decided to call it the Digital Age because a couple of reasons. You can get stuff digitally now, except for the omnibus, which ironically, but and there's also a lot of digital stuff in the stories to this. So I don't know if that will stick, but I'm going to try to coin a phrase and call today's comics the digital age. Now, Batgirl started back in the Bronze Age, and her stories were told by a lot of people. The writers were Frank Robbins, Elliot Maggin, Bob Rozakis, Gardner Fox, Mike Friedrich, and Denny O'Neil. Gardner Fox and Denny O'Neil and Elliot S. Maggin were all really good writers. They wrote really good Batgirl stories. Uh, the artists were Carmine Infantino, who was awesome as always. Uh, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, Gil Kane did a really good job on a lot of the stories in this book. Uh, a lot of them towards the end were done by Don Heck, who I liked a lot of his Marvel work, but it seemed like he kind of phoned it in a little bit on the Batgirl ones. Some of them were pretty good, some of them were a little phoned in. The guy was probably doing 5 comics at the same time, so I mean you can't really hold it against him. But uh, back at this time they were doing a lot of comics at once just to get page rates, so you can't really hold that against him. But the stuff Gil Kane did with this, and the I think the introductory story was Carmine Infantino, and he's the one, of course, that designed the current Flash in the Silver Age Flash, which I still think is I mean, it's a simple design, but I think it's really neat. I've always liked that design. The Batgirl stories in the Bronze Age were all self contained stories that were usually 1 or 2 parts, sometimes maybe 3. Um, you did have an occasion to where she would fight somebody like that was dealing with fashion designers or other things that you would stereotypically associate with women. So that was a little disappointing, but there wasn't a whole lot of it. She teamed up with Robin a lot. You didn't see Batman very much in these. Occasionally you'd see Commissioner Gordon, her father. Uh, but the thing that I really liked about the Bronze Age Batgirl was she was portrayed as being very smart. She had a PhD in library sciences, and even though she was, just a librarian, she was very smart. She definitely, you could tell she earned her doctorate. She was very smart. She figured out a lot of things. Uh, and she always did stuff on her own, even if Robin or Batman was involved. And she would usually get in trouble about halfway through the story and get captured or something. It was just a typical part of the stories at that time. And she would then get out of the jam, usually on her own, sometimes with the help of somebody else. There was one particular story that was inspired by Edgar Allan Poe in here, where she was getting bricked up like in the cask of Amontillado, and she needed a little help getting out of that. But I thought that was a really cool Poe inspired story. I'd read it somewhere else before, maybe in an 80-page giant or something, or 100-page giant that had some older stuff in it. But I recall reading that story before, but it was a really good story. And The other thing is that she became a congresswoman as Barbara Gordon. I didn't know that going into this. She was a very smart congresswoman. She did things for the people. She was popular. I don't know how she kept it a secret that she was Batgirl, because everywhere Barbara Gordon went as a congresswoman, Batgirl showed up, and they both had red hair. And I don't know how she kept it a secret, but she did. And she go to other countries sometimes. And anyway, she just did a lot of good. There was a lot of good stories in here. I really enjoyed it. Uh, the Bronze Age was an interesting time. Uh, I didn't realize she was later. I thought she was Silver Age, but I guess not. She was a little bit later in the Bronze Age when she was introduced, because they were introducing her on the TV show, the 60s Batman TV show, which I love. And they decided they better get her in the comic too. Uh, they had Batgirl and Batwoman in the past, but they were just kind of just not very good characters. So they finally brought in this Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, and she was a really good Batgirl. I'll show you a couple of things in here. Something I found neat was she had the Princess Leia haircut before Princess Leia had it, so maybe that had something to do with inspiring that haircut in the first Star Wars movie. Uh, but that right there, you see some pretty good art there. Another one is this is Gil Kane, and you can tell his line work is really good. Draws a really good looking Batgirl. Um, and I mean that in just in a general way. I mean, yes, she's pretty too, but I mean, he does a really good job with the costume and the other characters. And Gil Kane did quite a few stories in this omnibus, and he did a really good job. Now, like I said, some of the later stories were Don Heck, and some of them were pretty good. Some of them were just okay. But like I said, the guy was probably doing 5 or 6 comics at once, so I'll cut him some slack. Really love this Bronze Age Batgirl. There's a second volume. I have it on order, but I haven't gotten it yet. I really enjoyed this, but in the interest of time, I will move on to the Batgirl of Burnside. This is a fairly new story by Cameron Stewart, Brendan Fletcher, and Babs Tarr. There's also some other guest artists in it uh, as you go through, but the art stays pretty consistent throughout for the most part. Some of it's a little disparate from the main art. They try to do a little bit to manga artwork in here, uh, and I don't know how much that works for me on Batgirl. Uh, this Barbara Gordon is a little bit younger. Uh, it says outright in the Bronze Age when she was 25 in one of the stories. I get the feeling she's younger in this. She's smart, but she always falls for the dumbest stuff in this. And the first story, she fights literally a dating app, which, I mean, there's more to it than that, but I don't want to ruin the story in case you get this. Uh, but she literally does fight a dating app and something that goes on because of a program she's working on. And she ends up having a helper who's her roommate who for the life of me, I can't remember her name right now. So that's how much she stuck with me as a character. And they tried to set up her roommate as kind of an Oracle character, which is who Barbara Gordon became once she got shot by the Joker and was in a wheelchair. She became Oracle and was the eyes and ears and computer presence for all of the Bat team. And Oracle was a great character and probably the best use of Barbara Gordon that they could have made of her. But the new one, that they don't call her Oracle, they call her Operator, which is about as she's about as important as a telephone operator in here. Uh, didn't really care for that character too much. Every single character is they go for a lot of political correctness in here, and every character displays some kind of different uh, gender or uh, like nationality, and it's every single character. And I think they just tried a little bit too hard to be inclusive. I have no problems with being inclusive with people. I think that it is a much more diverse world today than what you would see in the Bronze Age, but I think they tried just a little bit too hard with it. Um, this also has the disadvantage of having to do with crossing over with other stories. Uh, there's a story where it crosses over with where for some reason Commissioner Gordon has become Batman and he wears a suit that looks like a robot rabbit and it's really stupid. I don't know what was going on in the main Bat books then, but I'm glad that I wasn't reading them because I would have been really disappointed because it looked really stupid. And they had a de-aged Commissioner Gordon who, if I can find it, yeah, here we go. They had a de-aged Commissioner Gordon with a horrible haircut and no mustache. I wouldn't even recognize that that was him unless they just said, hey, this is Commissioner Gordon. And he was Batman and had rabbit ears, and so every time he showed up as Bat Harvey, it was just really dumb. And that was dumb. There was some crossovers with Dick Grayson, who was apparently not Nightwing anymore and was some kind of secret agent. Uh, everybody thought he was dead, and he shows back up in one and does his best to keep Batgirl from finding out who he is because he doesn't want her to know that he's still alive. Excuse me. And then in another story, he shows up as Dick Grayson and wants to get back into her life immediately, which goes completely against the story that they just told. There's a lot of technology used in this, which is why I decided to dub it the digital age. Lots of different tech companies, lots of different techie things going on. Everybody that she knows works in tech in some way or another. There's a lot of the stuff that goes on uses these things, even these websites or dating apps and stuff, as uh, part of the problem of the story. Uh, just that also, if I can find it now, there we go. There's some of the other art that you can see. It's kind of manga-esque. That's Black Canary there with the blonde hair. I don't particularly care for the way they portray Black Canary. Here's some more. Like I said, she falls for things a little too easily. She's not. She's portrayed as being smart and having, her eidetic memory where she remembers everything that she ever sees, uh, like a photographic memory. And she just, that ends up working against her more than anything in here than using it for something good. I'm not saying I dislike this story. I liked it all right. I hated the crossover elements that came in the middle of it. There was one that crossed over with something that was like, there were like these Joker zombies, and the whole issue was a silent issue. And I really just had to scratch my head throughout trying to figure out what it was. And I eventually just kind of flipped through it because it just made no sense. It had nothing to do with the overarching story in this. And you could tell it was just there specifically because they wanted to cross over with the other books. So that was something that was a detriment in this, was the crossing over with other stuff. She had kind of weak enemies. She didn't fight any of the usual Bat villains. I know it seemed like they were trying to set up her own set of villains, but none of them were really strong villains. One of them was a little bit, but it dealt with her mind working against her. And the first story where she fights the dating app, and the last story where she fights someone called the Fugue, have a lot of similarities in that she's having her mind used against her. And it just is a little out of place, a little almost too science fiction-y for the way that they're playing the rest of the story. Uh, she, the Fugue was an interesting villain, but I'm not really sure how he used the powers that he used. It didn't really make a lot of sense. So, uh, you know, I liked it, but I didn't love it. And once again, I'm left with the older stuff, like in the case of Wonder Woman. The older stuff was better than the newer stuff. I really liked the Bronze Age Batgirl Omnibus. Had a lot of good stories in it. I mean, a lot of it was a product of its time. They were pretty short stories, unlike the bigger ones that were in the new Burnside Omnibus. But they're getting a little reflection there of the light. And I really liked it. Like I said, a lot of the art was really good. Uh, and I just really liked the stories better because they were self-contained. They didn't have any crossover junk. They just were well-told stories. And Barbara Gordon and Batgirl were always treated with respect in this. And that was something that was a little different from the time, kind of the same as Wonder Woman. Uh, but she even got a little bit even more respect than Wonder Woman did in hers. And she really was a great character. When she became Oracle, she was a great character. That was later on in the modern age. Uh, but Barbara Gordon has always been a really smart, independent, interesting character. And you really got that from the Bronze Age omnibus of Batgirl. And so I liked it better than the Burnside omnibus for the reasons I've stated. And I hope that you will give maybe at least the Bronze Age a chance. It was a really good comic. Like I said, there's a second volume I've got on order, but I'm waiting for some unknown reason. It hasn't been shipped yet. And because I was going to review it too with this, but uh, I decided to go ahead with it since there was only one of the Burnside, which completes the whole story told by those authors and artists. But I really like the Bronze Age Batgirl. Uh, if you like newer stuff and you like manga influence stuff, now I like manga, don't get me wrong, but I just didn't feel it was the best representation of Batgirl. It made it a little too silly sometimes. Uh, but I really like the Bronze Age. I hope you'll give it a shot. And thanks for sticking in here with me again for a way too long video. And uh, just to warn you, I will have more of these coming up where I compare some of the older stuff with newer stuff in comics. That just seems to be a thing that I'm interested in right now. There's only a few of you watching this anyway, so I'm just going to do what I enjoy and hope that you get some enjoyment out of it too. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.